glad. I'm glad you had no expectation of me. Not at all. I'm happy to talk, but there wasn't much I could do. And I was afraid, well, you're going to be mad at me because I couldn't fix this problem.
I knew
Nobody's ready.
Right, no one has to be pictured.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, call the meeting to order. Start with roll call.
Commissioner Allen?
Present.
Commissioner Norwood?
Here.
Commissioner Isdell is out. Commissioner Waddell?
Here.
Commissioner Stallings?
Here.
Commissioner Mason?
Here.
Mayor Pinkinen?
Here. Okay, item number 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the rescheduled regular session agenda of November 3rd, 2020. Anybody have anything? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to item 3, study items 3.1, update on city finances and CARES funding. Come on up.
Evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'll be talking about a financial update for our first quarter.
Can you bend your microphone just a little closer to you, sir? There you go. Thank you.
Was it a microphone issue? Slides. Now try.
Do we have any information?
It didn't look like it.
Didn't look like it.
Okay.
You good? Okay.
Okay, this first slide is our general fund revenue overall. For total, we're looking at a little over 14 million for the first 3 months. So this slide shows where we're at for the first 3 months. We're usually looking for 25%. So you can see we're doing pretty well. Total over budget is 1.5 million, or up 12% through September. If you look at general fund sales tax, we're up almost the full amount of the 1.5 million, or 18%, but that's only looking at budget through September. If you compare it to last year's actual receipts, we're actually only up 361,000, or 4.1%. So if you remember, during budget season, we budgeted sales tax 10% lower than what we budgeted last year. So you're going to see a little skew of what those numbers look like when you're comparing the actual receipts this year to the budget that we have. They're going to look a lot higher, so it's going to be euphoric, like we're doing very, very well, but we're doing okay. We're just, anyways. So a lot of the slides are going to look a little different, and I will probably just talk about the few things that we're comparing receipts to last year's receipts. So the sales tax obviously is our biggest increase. The grants is the other line that's a big hit due to our CARES Act funding that we have received. And we'll be talking about that on the last 2 slides.
Just say next slide.
Okay, I'll do that. So this looks at sales tax as a whole, not just the amount that goes to the general fund. So we're looking at the general fund, EMA, and the public safety, the total amount, which is sales tax, use tax, and the tobacco tax. So on this chart, we do have the 3 months of data. The blue line is what last year's receipts were. The red line is this year's receipts, and the green line is what we budgeted for this year. So you can see that's a big difference between our lowering 10% from last year's budget on budget number. So the current year is actually down in one of the 3 months, but in September of last year, you probably remember, we had a very large use tax receipt during that month. So that's why our blue for September is so much higher. This slide is just more numbers compared to what the slide was before. And this slide is comparing to budget, but I want to talk more about comparing receipts to receipts of what we received last year. So July and August, we actually had an increase from last year, which those were really good months. We had a 5.3% in July increase from last year and a 7.85% increase from last year, August. We have a small decrease in September. When you're looking at actual receipts to actual receipts from last year, just under 1% in October. Actually, I do have the numbers, they're just not on here. We have a decrease of 3%. So overall, for September year-to-date, we are still over 4% comparing actuals to actuals from last year. So that is reasonable, but when you have the last 2 months that we did have slight decreases, we'll be watching that here pretty quick. And hopefully in the next 10 days, we'll have some positive numbers. Next. Moving on to EMA revenue. This is just a snapshot of our percentages of where our revenue comes from for EMA. And these numbers are almost identical to what we budgeted percentage-wise. The only one that is a little bit different is our miscellaneous category. We'll see numbers on the next slide. But our miscellaneous category has to do with loan proceeds and things for CAW. And so those come at different times of the year. Therefore, they're not going to be exact when you just look at 3 months of the year. So here's the number side of the prior slide. So we're looking good to meet revenue projections for the year. We're on track. And if you look at water compared to last year, in the first 3 months, we're actually over 12%. If you look at it per budget, we are over 26%, the almost 4 million. That is due to us lowering water for budget purposes by $2 million from the year before. We had some historical data that showed that we may not receive that, so we wanted to be conservative, so that's where we sit. That should be the only one that's kind of skewed in that area. Stormwater, we're looking at 7% over last year. If you compare to budgets, it's about 12% over. Landfill is down from last year, but last year in August had 2 large receipts from 2 big customers in town, so that kind of skewed our history of being right on what we normally have or just a slight increase. But that's compared to last year's number. Compared to budget, we're still looking okay. Trash, we're 4% over last year and just about 4% when you compare to budget. Sewer is right around the same amount. And the miscellaneous has to do with what, like I mentioned before, the loan proceed drawdowns related to Call Lake. So the miscellaneous category is a little skewed. Transfers are 2% over last year, which has to do with the sales tax money that comes into EMA from general fund. So this just shows the percent of budget where we're sitting for the first 3 months. Everything looks about right. We always want to look for 25% and above. So if the loan proceeds in the miscellaneous category were not there, we would reduce that line by the $1.3 million, and the total overalls would fall to $16.3 million, and that would be 30% overall.
Are we looking at 3 months?
Yes, everything here is 3 months, except the few little bits that I said about sales tax for October. Hotel motel tax is down, same. Blue is last year's receipts, red is this year's receipts, and green is budget. And we have been down each month this year on receipts compared to last year's. Overall, we're down 58,000 or 16.78%. So this year, we budgeted revenue projections at 1.2, which we did lower it from last year, but not knowing anything that was going to happen for COVID or anything like that, we may not have lowered it enough, but maybe the rest of the year will pick up and everything will be all
Can I
right.
ask a question? On that 53,000 that the city's down from the hotel motel, was it 53, 58?
Yeah, it's around 58.
58. What does that calculate out to the property owners, to the hotel operators? Do you know right off the top? I mean, if that's 13, is it 13, 14% is what our hotel motel tax is? So
That's 8, isn't it?
It's 8% plus the sales tax, right? So it ends up being 9.1?
I would have
9.1
to.
plus 8. So yes, hotel tax, they get hit with, I think it's 17.1%,
okay.
because they pay the sales tax and the hotel tax.
Just trying to think what that would calculate to revenue that they don't have either.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be substantial.
Right, what they, yeah, so they've lost revenue, you're right, because the people that stay there, they charge their fees too, and collect and hold for us. Out of that 8% though, you might tell them to break down, we don't get all 8% either, right?
No, it's the 5%, 3%
Yeah.
breakdown
Okay.
that we send to the county for them to run the expo center.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So this year, we only budgeted the 1.2 million. Last year, we budgeted 1.45 million, but only collected 1.1. So it's been down for a couple of years. These slides, next two slides are a little more difficult to see everything, but in general, you're looking at the percentage of revenue for each fund and then your percentage of expense. So we already talked about general fund being sales tax is what's higher. On the expense side, we pay all of our insurance payments in July, so that kind of skews that number a little bit. The only other ones that I was going to talk about is airport. We're a little high on revenue there because of our fuel sales being up, which causes our cost of goods sales being up on the expense side. The other thing is they did receive their $69,000 CARES Act money, so that's a little higher than what we budgeted because we didn't budget anything for that. So golf is just having a really good year. Their expenses are somewhat seasonal for the most part, so it probably will shy off from the 33% for them. EMA has to do with the utility revenues being higher than what we budgeted due to mainly from the water being budgeted lower, and then of course sales tax coming in higher is another 774 of that 1.5 from the utility revenues. So the percent on the expenses has to do with debt payments being, when we pay them, we don't spread them over 6 months, we pay them in September, so that's when the expense hits. So the 3 months, it looks a little skewed, but should really, if you think about it, would be spread through December. It wouldn't be near as high. But we are tracking the overages for EMA, and actually all of our capital improvement funds, just depends on when they encumber their projects. So if you look at the expense column, it also includes the encumbrances, and that is a significant difference because that will include overages from last year when we roll over our encumbrances, and it also, if you have a $2 million project and we encumber it in September, that entire $2 million is now showing in our expense. So the majority of the rest of them that look like they may need help really are not. There's nothing that we are looking at severe or anything as of this moment. So the few other ones for capital improvement, same that, like I talked before. So overall, based on September financial statements, we might have some appropriations later for airport due to their sales being higher for fuel, and general fund for sales tax being higher, and we hope that continues. And maybe some other areas if there's some expenses for COVID that we did not budget for, and really nothing was budgeted for COVID, so any of those expenses that we didn't get, that we received for CARES Act, but they may not have been in the budget, so it's possible we have a budget appropriation for that. Any questions so far?
Nope.
Okay, we'll start talking about CARES Act. So CDBG, EPTA, police, airport, and then we have general CARES fund. CDBG received $267,000 in their first phase, and you might remember $140,000 we did an agreement with CDSA, and $60,000 with Catholic Charities already. And you can see that we've requested part of that and received part of that. We actually have received the $134,000 for CDSA just yesterday, I believe. So phase one is not quite totally done, but then phase two, we expect to do similar things like we did in phase one, but all of those ideas are still out. And nothing on paper yet of what we're exactly going to do. So they were 4 essential services. Also held, the smaller amount held for other items, but the main items were for supplementing rent, utilities, food, diapers, formula for those in need. Both phases would be for the similar things. So EMA's phase one, we actually received half of that up front, and then she just files the paperwork to attribute expenses to that. And there's already a phase two that we have not received, of course, but the money is set aside for her, and it is to required for covering operating expenses due to COVID revenue shortfalls. Any questions on this half yet?
Nope.
Okay. So police has a small amount specifically for protective police equipment, and it's been ordered, I believe, but we have not received anything because that's on a reimbursement basis. Airport was $69,000, and it was to cover revenue shortfalls also, and we sent that in and we received the cash. General CARES, we had 4 requests. The first request was April to June COVID expenses. That also included the Family First paid leave monies that we had during, or payroll expenses that we had during that time. And also when we went on rotating schedules for 5 weeks, the expenses that we had for that. And then the second request was just for hand sanitizer, extra things in an office to spread people out, signs and stickers and all of those extra items that we had. And the same for the third, that was in August. The last one was the largest, and that was when they came back and said that public safety payroll expense could be reimbursed from March 1st through December 31st. So that was our first request, reimbursement request for that. We actually sent in only March through July at that point. We knew we were getting close to our dollar amount. We actually requested more, thinking that in the future, if they came up with more money, we might go ahead and get the piece that was not. But we only had the 3.3 million remaining of our 3.8, so that was the amount that, and we actually have received that also. Any questions?
No?
Okay, thank you.
All righty, thank you. Okay. Item number 3.2, discuss a proposed revision to the Planned Unit Development Ordinance.
This ordinance, planned unit development, is where you make your, you've got a site and you make your own development plan, rather than relying on our zoning code specifics. And the first change is housekeeping. A previous commercial, our comprehensive plan back in 2005 still talked about intensities and in residential and non-residential development. And we had these two sections, 1110A6, the number of permitted dwelling units, and then the non-residential intensities. And the new comprehensive plan that was enacted in 2015 did away with talking about density, intensity. So these were just left over. So those are really just housekeeping things. They refer to something that was in the comprehensive plan that is no longer in the comprehensive plan. So we're just striking them and reserving the sections. The real meat of the ordinance is that we were thinking we were going to have a residential PUD. It doesn't look like we're going to have it right now, but we had already done the work on the ordinance to open up residential developments so that they could happen in the different zones that make sense. So prior to this, we had not said that you could do a residential PUD in R3. And the PUD we thought was going to happen, and it still might, was in a mobile home neighborhood district that was basically grass. And so we've added that in. And in addition, that's really the change that was required, was that we had someone who wanted to do a residential PUD in R3 and we hadn't allowed for it, and community development thought that we should allow for it. So we're adding R3. Then when we talked about that, and I talked with Chris about, okay, well, we've got mobile home dwellings and we're only allowing them in R3, but what about R6, which is mobile home park district? Now, that probably is theoretical, because most of the mobile home districts are full, or at least are already occupied. But why not, there's no reason why you couldn't have a PUD that's a mobile home unit, and so we're adding the R6 in. But realistically, unless someone decided that they wanted to redo it, this may never be used. Okay, the third is also housekeeping. We recently indicated that boarding and rooming houses could be in C3. So we don't need 2. And 2 no longer really, so the boarding or rooming houses are only permitted in an R3 district. Well, they could also be permitted in R7, and they could also, I don't really know why you would want boarding or rooming houses. I don't know if boarding and rooming houses would be something that would be in a PUD. But if it were, this is no longer required because of the change that we did a couple months ago. So this is just really housekeeping. We're hopeful that the situation may get cleared up or something, and we may have a residential PUD going in, or there may be a new location. Right now, we don't think that that's happening, but rather than wait until they come up with a new site, we thought we should get the ordinance fixed so that we're not causing a delay. Any questions?
Has MAPC looked through all this? Is this on their suggestion, or, David, don't you sit on that board?
I do.
Looked at all this previously,
I
I
don't think
guess?
I've seen any of
No,
this.
no.
Have I?
But it will go to them next. This was just to let you guys look at it. It will go to them, then it'll come back to you.
Okay.
And it's mostly just taking, it's just mostly housekeeping.
Okay, thank you. All right. Item 3.3, discuss ice storm cleanup. Gerald.
Yes, I want to talk about ice storm cleanup. It's obviously been about a week since a massive ice storm. We will continue over the coming weeks, come to realize how big an ice storm it was with volume of limbs that are down. Many of you, and I remember I lived here in 2002, I think it was 2002, through that really big ice storm where the whole state was out of power. And I think of that as the mother of all ice storms, the really big one. I don't know that we have, I wasn't able to get information on how much brush we had for a comparison, but I think it was a lot. But it was interesting to note that, in my opinion, this is the biggest ice storm since then. But OG&E had reported in the newspaper that they had more outages in this one than they said they'd ever had. And I thought, I was going to ask the question if I had somebody to ask. You mean more than the 2002? But so it was a really big ice storm. We had the complication of the weather, power outages, limbs down. So now we're working the cleanup. We know from experience that an event of this magnitude, we need help. So that's really the purpose, to educate or inform you of what we're doing and make sure we're on the right track. But we're bringing in some contractors. I'm doing it on an emergency basis. We'll be coming back to you very soon, if not on the 17th, maybe even before, in a special meeting, because this will far exceed my spending limits to be able to engage. But I think it's worth it, and I'll explain. And again, this is the effort of city staff has done a phenomenal job, in my opinion. They were out the first week, I guess last week, or let's see, it's been a little over a week now. Yeah. Anyway, time flies. They cleared the roads. Those were the immediate issues, clearing the roads, and so that took some time. Now we've begun cleanup. Many people over the weekend, and even before, been piling up. You see them piles all over town. We already have a contractor in town picking up piles today, and we have 3 clamshells out ourselves. It's a tremendous effort. Everett Glenn, Public Works Director, he's on Zoom right now. David Hunter sitting here, Public Utilities Director. Scott Morris, Assistant City Manager. Derek and the communication team. It's just a great effort. Tim Stevens, Solid Waste Supervisor, Ashley Humphreys. So a combined effort. In a nutshell, we're doing several things. Obviously, the landfill's an asset that we have. It was open immediately. People have been using it. The lines were really long. So we've tried to improve efficiencies out there. We were in the process of implementing a new scale. We've done that already. So there's more input now. I was out there today, and when I was out there this afternoon, there was no line. So
they were all voting.
That's right. Everybody's voting or waiting to see what happens. But there is a big pile of brush out there at the landfill, and it will continue to be worked with our tub grinder out there. You can see our hours of operation. We're even opening up on Sunday for a couple of Sundays for some hours for brush only. Brush only. We won't be doing trash those days, but to help people that are working to bring stuff out. But we also thought, and I know that I had some good suggestions from some commissioners, also, and some staff that have been here a while. And remember, we had some drop-off sites. So we're standing up 2 drop-off sites. We're getting ready to announce that to the public. There's some signs up now. But anyway, here's the details. At those 2 drop sites, there's going to be chipping, grinding at those locations. So we'll have one on 10th Street. We'll show you a picture, a map in a minute. And we'll have one at the service center. The one on 10th Street's intended for the contractor to haul the stuff to. They have very large trucks. I believe they're 100-yard trucks and maybe even bigger, up to 160 yards. They have a clamshell arm on them, and they've been out picking up stuff today already. Our 3 clamshells have already been out several days picking up stuff. We'll be able to use both, but I think it's more convenient right now for us to use the service center site. So basically, I think I've told you the stuff that's on this. We've got 3 grapple trucks. They'll be working. We'll obviously be working overtime on Saturdays and maybe some limited times, maybe on Sundays as well. Typically at the landfill for brush, at least for landscape companies and others, we require, we charge those folks. And even anybody coming out there with brush, we ask for bring a utility bill account. We've dispensed with that for just ease of, if you're carrying brush, we'll send you to the brush pile, we'll drop it, we'll chip it, and we'll deal with it. And so that's what all that says.
Darryl?
Yes, sir.
But, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Do we weigh that because we get some money out of knowing how much we have debris there is? Or, I guess I don't understand. So do we weigh it when it comes to the landfill, or does it get weighed at the outside sites, or what's that all about?
I'm going to tell you what I think, and then if I'm wrong, I know Scott and David are going to jump in and correct me, but at the landfill we have scales, so we can weigh the brush. We weigh them on and we weigh them off so we know what the volume and tonnage of brush is. At the drop sites, we don't have scales, so we're measuring there by cubic yards, and we're doing that based on the size of the contractor trucks or our 20-yard containers. And that's how we're keeping track of brush. And also, David, you may want to jump in and help me, I think, or Scott, when we haul stuff from the sites, I'll just let you answer that because you'll get it right.
Well, another part of that is the state of Oklahoma charges us in our landfill. They charge us a fee for what we bury and what we bury at our landfill. But all of the weight that we bring in for grass and for limbs can be subtracted out of that. And so we don't want to pay the state any more than we have to. So we weigh that, and that gets subtracted from what we have to pay the state. So that's one of the things that we do, one of the reasons. We don't know if they might come back and ask us how many tons that we did during the ice storm. So we should be able to answer that question if it gets asked. And then
in 2002, we burned it. What are we doing with the waste this time? Are we going to bury it or what?
Well, we are chipping on site. Gerald's got a few more slides to show.
Right.
We've got a few chippers at one site and a tub grinder that we're going to have at another site. So we're going to try to chip as much as we can. And at the Government Springs South site, there's a possibility that we can spread a lot of that out in an area that isn't used by the public and not have to carry that to the landfill and dump that. But a lot of it can be brought to the landfill and used for cover, and we can put it at the top of the landfill and reuse that for really good purposes. And the contractor, Gerald will get to that, but the contractor on the 10th Street site will charge us for the cubic yards that they grind, and so they're going to keep track of the cubic yards, and we will likely never know what the tonnage is that is not hauled to the landfill. We could make an estimate based on cubic yards, but we wouldn't have an official weight. Did you have anything else to add, Mr. Hunter?
No, the only thing to note was when we did look at the chipper and the size and the quality, it looks like it might actually be good landscape material. And in the past, when we've had stuff of that size, because our tub grinder at the landfill does big blocks of stuff, these chippers are going to actually make smaller grinding bits. It'll probably be something that the public might want to make use of, because it's actually just going to be leaves, grass, and shrub that we're grinding up to small sizes. It can actually be used for landscape purposes, and in the past, what I've seen in the past in other places is we just give that to the public if they want it, and a lot of landscape companies or other folks will actually take it off of our hands. So it'll be something that we won't be putting in the landfill, and it might be put as a beneficial reuse to the community.
Okay.
Gerald, I have a comment. Someone who visited the landfill on Saturday with a truckload of debris. I don't know who made the decision to not individually stop us and check your card, but just, that was a very good decision, a very timely decision, because when I went in at around 2 o'clock on Saturday, the line came out to the road and then down the road, and it was a lot of people, but it went really quickly because the young lady that runs that she was doing a really good job. And another kudo is the guys that were out there where you backed in were managing and telling you where to pull in and where to go, and it could have been a huge mess. It was still a bit slow, but with the number of people that was out there was not much else you could do. But I think the landfill in general did a great job. So,
Well, thank you. That's a fantastic compliment for David and Tim Stevens and the landfill personnel and solid waste. We are doing everything we can to quickly respond to this, and so I don't think we'll see the lines we had before because of the efficiencies, and it sounded like they went okay. I'm glad to hear that, sir. I'll just talk briefly about the contractors. Right now, currently, we have Brown's Tree Service. They reached out to us, gave us a quote. They've got great experience. They go around doing things like the Joplin tornado, other ice storms, so this is what they do. And so they're very fast, and that's very appealing to me because I think what we want, and I think what you wanted, and what the citizens want is a fast response. Let's get this stuff picked up. Let's get rid of it. We know it's going to cost money. We'll talk about how we're going to get reimbursed for a lot of this in a minute. I think it'll be worth it. We'll probably end up spending, I'm guessing at least probably in the neighborhood of $300,000 to either this contractor or others if we bring others on or change vendors. This one will be providing a tub grinder too at the 10th Street site. And so anyway, they know what they're doing. By Right Services is working the 2 chipping teams. We were originally going to have 1 chipping team at each place, but we've determined that the chipping equipment they have is probably not sufficient for the magnitude of the volume we're dealing with. So they're going to be working the service center site, and the service center site is really more of a site for residents or people pulling trailers and stuff, not for these big trucks. We want these big trucks going to 10th Street. So I know Everett and David have coordinated, Everett specifically, with these contractors, setting up the sites, and we'll show you a map here in a minute. Here's a map of the service center. You come off of, the entrances to come off of Chestnut. Pull on in. Right here's the Waterworks pond by Water Production. You'll go back in here, and there's a gravel area. We are working hard to get it organized in there, so there'll be personnel, city personnel in there directing you where to go. The contractor will have 2 chipper teams in there, and we'll be chipping and pushing stuff out of the way. And I believe David could speak more to it, but I think we have roll-offs there or containers that will hold the chips and eventually be moved to the landfill or wherever we're going to put them. Let me see. Here's just a close-up. When you come in, we've tried to make both of these sites. Everett and David have thought these through quite a bit. We want to have an ingress site and an egress site separate so we don't clog up traffic. So when you come off of Chestnut, the idea is to leave. We removed a fence that we used to have somewhere in here. So you'll actually come through here, go through the soccer area parking lot, and come out that road just outside the service center gates on Poplar, and it takes you right out to Van Buren. So that's the intent. Obviously, if we have flow problems, we'll adjust as we go. We've already got a sign up you can see on Chestnut for the public for ease of use. It actually helps if people bring stuff, that helps. And then, of course, we're going to the curb too. These are pictures taken today, I believe, by Ashley Humphreys and maybe others in the communication team. This just shows the road in past water plant 1. You can see the public works sign. Anyway, it takes you in. There shows one of our grapple trucks. There's more signage, which there's the turn to the northwest by that pond up into the area where you'll see a fence, and ultimately we're going to get to a big pile of brush, and you see activity, and there you can see that's probably a tiny pile compared to what it's going to look like over time. Here's the site off of 10th Street. This is just really the backside of Government Springs Park. You can see here's the tennis courts, here's the football fields. This is actually an old landfill for the city in this area. And a long time ago, Jerry, you could tell us about it, there used to be we used to play down here, I think, on some fields that we've abandoned, basically. This is a great area for this type of thing. And so we're trying to improve a road just south of Animal Control right here. There's already some activity down here, piles of brush being dropped by the contractor. They'll come in here, then they'll pull out here and go this way out on Indiana and come out on 10th Street, go back to 412. And so we think that's a pretty efficient setup. It avoids these contractors. We don't want them wasting time hauling the stuff all the way out to the landfill. It's much better to drop it here and keep them moving, going into the communities. Here's just a close-up of the map. Here's more signage. I think I will be asking to add one more sign off of 412 unless we've got it up there. At 10th Street, this is off of 10th Street, and you can see Animal Control, it looks like here, or Animal Welfare, I'm sorry, right here. This is the jail. There's Animal Welfare. So there's some actually activity as we first pulled in. You can see we're going to make some ruts, but those are going to get packed down over time, and there'll be a nice road, a big pile of brush. I'm going to talk a little bit about this and then call David up to talk about some more because he's worked with DEQ on these sites. There's specific requirements. We can't just go out there and start doing stuff. He's already worked that. But this is just to give you more idea of what we're looking at. This early estimate we have of 50,000 cubic yards, which could be an underestimate, came to us from the Browns Tree Service, just making an estimate. I know Everett did tell me that he talked to them a little bit today, and they weren't sure that they looked at the whole town. So I won't be surprised if we don't find out we have more brush than that. The chipper teams, I believe we're still planning to work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, because we're trying to get this done. The estimates of those costs now will be around 80 grand. We'll be adjusting those as we come to you with the emergency item to approve this going forward. We anticipate the city's going to spend on overtime. We've already spent about $25,000. Everett's got some good tracking stuff going, I saw today. We're going to spend at least $100,000 on overtime, materials, equipment time. These are all things that we fill out through FEMA on any disaster. We have specified forms we use. We're already using those forms. And in the end, this has not been declared a disaster yet by the president, but I'm confident it will be. There's a threshold level that has to be met. Mike Honigsberg knows all about that. The threshold he's told us about 228,000. We're going to meet that by ourselves. So it's clear to me this will be declared a disaster, not just for us, but for a lot of the state of Oklahoma and many counties. And there's the FEMA reimbursement stuff. The downside is why the city's in a good financial condition. So we have reserves. You just got a good financial report that our sales tax are better than we thought they were going to be. It comes at a good time. We have some reserves anyway. We're going to have to spend some of those. So we're going to have to appropriate some money at whatever our next meeting is. But we will get back ideally we should get back about 87.5% of the cost of this cleanup. 75% of it is by FEMA, and 12.5% is through the state, I believe through OEM, Office of Emergency Management. The downside is it does take a long time sometimes to get that money. I can remember when I came here in 2005, we still hadn't gotten some of the reimbursements from the 2002 claim. So that's the kind of time. The government takes a little time for the wheels to turn. But David, you want to come up and talk a little bit more about the sites and what you did, DQ and...
Gerald, could I before you ask David to come up?
Yes.
One thing, everybody is the constituents seem to be very happy with the fact you're going to come around and gather the debris that's on the curb, okay? Now, it's pretty new right now. It's not bothering anybody. How long do you think we're going to see to get most of that picked up? Because people will start calling, pretty quick. Can you get it hurried up? And that's not a good phone call because I can't.
We are going to try to expedite it. In fact, we may come up with some marketing stuff like 30 days to spread the chips or something like that. And that's just off the top of my head. But David's got, he can talk to you more about the planning that Tim and he have done on the areas of town and maybe give you a better idea than I can. I know we're going to push with the contractors. I think we make a big dent in 30 days. So I'll say that.
Hey, Jared.
Yes, sir. Everett, are you out there?
Yes, I did talk to the contractor today, and they think really positive they can be done in 30 days.
Okay. That's a good answer.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, prior to the contractor coming in, we were just looking at our city resources, and we were thinking we had a really good chance of getting everything done prior to the end of the year. It would have taken a lot of work and hours, but with these additional resources, we think there's a very good chance that 30 days. I think there might be a little bit of wiggle room on that to a few more weeks to get those spots that things get dragged out on that we have to miss. But I think a 30 days to about 6 weeks is what the expectation is. The only thing about those two sites that we had to jump through hoops on was there are some Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality requirements just to make sure that we're doing due diligence on the sites. We did have to get with well, we're not done with it, but the State Archaeological Survey and the State Office of Historic Preservation, just to make sure that we weren't putting things on a site that had any type of historic significance. We did find...
Like dinosaur bones?
Huh?
Dinosaur bones?
My comment was a Viking ship. There might have been a Viking ship over there behind the service center. You never know. And there's a reason, there could be something significant that you don't know about. So we just met with ODEQ today. He feels very good about our sites and does not have any concern. The only thing that they put on is that they want to try and have us fully remediated within a 90-day period from the start. So so that actually helps us to have some incentive to get in, get out, and get these sites cleaned up and back to the way they were prior to this happening. So we do have some other things to help us make sure that we get this cleaned up in a timely manner. We did have an issue at the service center site. There was some proximity to one of our groundwater wells, but we did move everything past the 300-foot barrier, and the ODEQ representative felt very good about what we were doing. So we've already been given essentially approval from the top people in ODEQ to proceed, even though our application has not been fully assessed. But at this point, I think our sites are really good. As Gerald had said, it is an evolving situation. The chippers came in, we looked at them. They're probably not going to be all that we need. So I think what we're going to be continually doing is looking at how we can do this optimally to get the job done as quickly as possible within the time that we need for our community. Any questions?
Can you speak to the routes, maybe, that you have the routes? Did you intend to give the contractors routes, or did you ever do that?
We are still working on the routes. Essentially, right now, we're going through the main thoroughfares, and we're also kind of aligning the main thoroughfares in the city and the major streets, both east and west, north and south, with the C-Cleat fix calls. And then we're also getting a lot of calls into our offices at the service center and other parts of the city. I think the other day, one of our secretaries had about 300 calls on her phone alone. So we do have a lot of calls coming in. We're trying to get that in as work orders so that we can map that out. Where we see clustering is where we're going to send the contractors, and then we're going to use city resources to essentially try and fill in the gaps where we need them. But at this point right now, I think today we were working on Broadway, Main, Cherokee, and Randolph. We've got a few other spots, Indian Springs or Indian Hills, I think, is one of them. And then the area around the high school, we do have a lot of calls and trees that were down there. But essentially, we're going to look at where the calls were, where it's clustered, and try and send them there to try and hit those spots and put a big dent in the big spot first. Any additional questions?
So on that estimate of overtime, $100,000, and that was for 30 to 45 days, roughly, right? So if we would just try to take this on ourselves, that could easily run up around $300,000, couldn't it?
I actually don't think we have the staff and resources to even do this.
Yeah.
We just don't even have the people, the manpower, and the equipment. So it's actually not even a good comparison from city staff standpoint.
And if they could, it would be a 6-month project, because there's no way they could get it done.
We'd be running essentially 24 hours a day with about 3 or 4 times the staff.
You're saying we would spend that line share anyway.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
it'd take 2 to 3 times as long. Yeah.
David, question for you.
Sir.
Are we charging the private contractors that are doing someone to work privately when they go?
No, we made a decision actually starting on the Saturday when we stopped. There was a little bit of discussion about, but on Saturday to Sunday, we made the decision that anybody bringing brush into the landfill or to those two transfer sites, it's going to be free. And essentially, if you're bringing it to the transfer sites, we have no way to charge you. So just to be fair and equitable, if you're bringing brush to the landfill for the next 4 weeks, it's going to be free as well.
Yeah, I think cosmetic trimming is probably not being done right now anyway, so I'm not sure we're missing much there.
Any questions? Thank you.
I think there's one more slide. Do you want to talk about that one? If you press this more, I think it's the solid waste schedule, holiday schedule.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, holiday schedule, Monday pickup is Thursday. I think this is kind of a public service announcement.
Okay.
No trash on Thanksgiving Day. Anyway, we'll put this out in press release and stuff. And the next slide is just questions. So our effort's really to do this as quickly as possible. But we're going to have to come to you. We're going to have to spend some money to get it done quickly. And then we'll get reimbursed most of it. So far, I think it's going well. Probably to help manage expectations, maybe we'll work with on the routes and with communications to help notify the public areas we're working in to help manage phone calls and stuff. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, I appreciate all the work that the city did right after the storm. I mean, you guys jumped on it. You didn't wait for anything. You put together a plan of action. All the decisions that you've made to try and speed up the recovery efforts are very much appreciated. I think it was well thought out, coming up with a couple of drop zones to be able to do it. It does a lot of things. One, it lets you do that in a specific place. Two, it doesn't create the logjam of everybody trying to go to the landfill because people have other things they want to bring there as well. So I think it was really well thought out plan, and just appreciate the way the city responded to that. So thank you all. Any other? Okay, item number 4, we're going to adjourn. We'll get back here at 6:30, so let's take a little break and we'll see you in a little bit.